You are watching Tech Confessions, created by Amy Lewis and brought to you by VMware.
Welcome to the show, Chris.
Right on.
So we're here today to get your tech confession, and I'd like to know what your software-defined moment was. When did you flip a switch from thinking solely about hardware and really flipped into that software mode?
Yeah, you're going to get that out of me because I'm in this really comfy chair.
That's,
feels good.
That's what we look for.
And we talked about it a little bit earlier, but it was the moment that I got invited to the NSX boot camp right around 2014. Prior to that, I've been working with a lot of networking gear for a while, config, routers and switches and things like that. And I was in the class early 2014 to learn NSX, and about halfway through, finally the light bulb went off where I was thinking, we're accomplishing the same things, but we're doing it with a software layer in the hypervisor, and it was kind of blew my mind a bit. So I think that's when it went off for me, at a deep level.
And how did you apply that? Where did you take it next when you sort of made that shift?
I started writing code, actually. So
interesting.
It made me look at GitHub and writing and using Git to actually encapsulate a bunch of code that I wrote for building out all of the switches and the edge routers and the distributed virtual switches and everything I needed to do with NSX, because I realized that what I really wanted to do was play with all the bits and not setting up the install and configuring NSX and the kind of the boring stuff. So I automated as much of that as I could so that I could really just do what happens if I have 10 switches or 6 or different routing protocols and whatnot. And so it forced me to write the code, put it on GitHub, open source it. And that was kind of cool because I had not really worked with a RESTful API at that level until I started working with that product. So it was pretty groovy for me.
So it was almost a gateway for you, if you will, into these other...
A good gateway.
Yes.
Usually that's a bad word.
Right. No, positive,
yeah,
right?
That was one of the first repositories that I built out and started getting it open source. And there have been many more since then, and the code's still available if you want to see how horrible I was at writing into an API, 5 years ago or 4 years ago. But definitely, it was a good moment in my career, and it really launch-padded a bunch of other open source projects that I'm very happy and proud to have put together.
And what would you say in terms of your conversations with customers? How did that shift conversations you would have with customers since you had that sort of light bulb go off?
I mean, a lot of it was around customers that were looking for the hardware nerd knobs and things like that, and they, we talk about how quick it would actually install and configure, and that really most of the work, if not 95% of it, was around the design itself, and kind of getting the concepts and looking at the logical and the conceptual designs for their network. And then once we actually had that squared away, I went to a client site, installed the product, and I think that was a couple hours, and they're like, so that's it? I'm like, that's it. I mean, it's all software. There's not really anything to do. Now that we have our full config and design put together, we just kind of feed that into the environment, and it auto builds everything out. And then they're like, what happens after that? I'm like, well, it's all set. You just add more environments. They all look the same. The software handles the rest. And they then had that moment, that epiphany. I'm like, this is killer. I'm like, yeah. So the idea of setting up VLANs and doing all those kind of very hardware, meticulous sort of things you used to do, it's like that's dead. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty dead. It's all now a JSON file that you feed into this automation suite. So I think they were happy in a lot of ways.
That's incredible. Yeah. So what would you say? Could you have predicted it? Did you see it coming? Or I think of you as somebody who you do a lot of research for your podcast, a lot of things in your spare time, and it sounds like even this kind of surprised you at that, like you said, that deep level of transformation. What do you think is coming? What are you looking to be surprised by next?
I mean, yeah, it did. I had enough foresight to know that when I got the invite,
I
was very bold with my employer, saying I'm going to this.
Yeah.
This is happening. Because in a couple years, not today, but years, weeks, etc., this is going to be huge.
Yeah.
And look at it now. I mean, NSX is one of the 2 big earners for VMware, and we all knew that was going to come, just a matter of time. I think now it's more about getting that platform and that software stack into other environments. It's always been very advantageous to have it in a VMware environment, but what about AWS as an example, or the VMware Cloud Foundation stack, etc.? And the proliferation and the extension, I would say, of that software stack into the services that can go along with it above and beyond. Like, I saw the announcement at the VMworld US environment where it was like, well, now that we have that full stack in there, we can start adding security services on top of it above and beyond just, this is Joe User and he's in this role and he can do whatever,
Right.
that kind of jazz. It's more about, okay, we can start whitelisting things based on behaviors, plug it into a cloud platform that can look at those behaviors. It's like, yeah, it's all software. Makes sense. It's all driven by an API. So you can start leveraging, machine learning gets used a lot, but realistically, you can look at your environment in that kind of way, and that's where I get really excited.
So that's going to be your next. We'll find you. Hands
yeah, I mean,
it's going
to take a while because we're still figuring that out, but it's possible. And I think anything that's possible and will drive revenue and drive, simplicity into the data center and the cloud ultimately ends up getting adopted. So to me, it's just a matter of when, not if.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Sure. Thank you.
And when you're ready to make your tech confession, visit us at techconfessionstheshow.com.